Okay, you know that megalithic architecture is a phenomenon largely spread around the world. But the megaliths of Oceania are a little less known. The aim of this lecture is not to present you a complete view of the last tradition without any relationship with Europe, Western Europe, but to explore a particular point: the economic impact of the big stone buildings from the Pacific area. Indeed, for the period between the 18th and the 20th centuries, we have for this part of the world some testimonies about the cost, the price of the community activities, as the building of megaliths or other community projects. I think that these ethno-archaeological examples are very instructive for us and for our reconstructions of the European megalith societies. Oh no. My first example is not exactly in Oceania, but in the Indian Ocean on the Nias Islands. It is in the offing of the west coast of Sumatra. On this island, megaliths are simple stones without any erection. But we know the context of these big stones laid in front of some houses in the villages. This island is known from the 9th century through travel accounts of Arab traders. But the first comments appear only during the 17th century, when the East India Company starts exploitation of Nias, and when began the first scientific studies at the end of the 19th century. The megaliths of the south of Nias have a special function. The big stones are only in front of some domestic houses as a representation of the society based on the acquisition of merits in order to maintain social structure. Here you have a modern village with the big stones in front of some houses. And a plan of a village of the south part of this island. The village is only a big street with all of the houses, and the red dots, it's the big stone, the megalithic stones. The social structure at Nias is in 3 ranks. The nobles are the descendants of mythical ancestors, the people and the slaves. There are also some concealers from the people nominated by their merits. Nobles and concealers must provide feasts, festivals, to keep their rank or to change it for an higher one. These festivals are named Owasa. It's merit feast. Each feast is commemorated by the installation of a megalith. But to organize the workmen for the carving of this megalith and its moving, its transportation, nobles and concealers must provide food during a long time for all of the people. I have a picture of a moving of a megalith in this island. It's a picture from the beginning of the 20th century. In such situations, the price, the cost of a simple megalithic stone is very high. The result is an ostentatious megalith laid in front of the house of the chief or of the persons of a high social rank. In the central part of the same island, the simple big stones are replaced by big stone statues with a similar function. You have here a modern village with old and modern megalithic statues. But it's exactly the same function. These statues are erected for the same social obligation. In conclusion, for this island, megaliths and statues of Nias Island are the internal symbols of richness and power, and the man who gave a feast, and of the man who gave a feast. It's a cumulative art because accumulation of megaliths or of stone statues increase the power and the symbolic richness. Another example of a social system to give symbolic richness and power is the Kula ring. It's a trade system between small islands at the southeast of Papua New Guinea. Yes, here you have a plant of a village from the center of Nias with the houses and also all of the statues. And the plan of Nias with the repartition of megalith stones, simple megalithic stones and statues. Alors, the Kula ring, it's a trade system between the small islands of the southeast of Papua New Guinea. The Kula ring was studied at the beginning of the 20th century by Bronislaw Malinowski, the famous Malinowski. Yeah, in this part, this Kula ring takes place in this part of Papua New Guinea. In this case, there is no question of megalith building, but an exchange structure for similar aim. This aim is ostentatious demonstration of richness and power. In fact, the traded items are only necklaces or armbands without market value, only a symbolic value. You see here a necklace and an armband from this part of the world. The Kula ring is a travel round small part of the South Pacific between small islands. On each step, the sailors offer to the islanders encountered some shell necklaces and armbands with the hope to receive similar objects in return. In fact, the same necklaces or armbands move from an island to another one, and after some years, a necklace or an armband returns sometimes to its first island. The necklaces turn in clockwise. I'll show you the map. Yeah. The necklaces turn in clockwise, the bands on the opposite direction. A man increases his prestige not by the possession of this object, but only by the number of necklaces or armband exchanged. Otherwise, to organize a Kula expedition, the man who wants to lead the trip and thus increase his prestige must pay for entire preparation, that is to say, the collect of the wood for the boats, the manufacturing of the same boats, feasts or festivals for the workmen and their family, and finally storage of food for the travel. A Kula ring, a travel for the Kula is sometimes one year. It's a very long way. Again, it is a very expensive structure only for a demonstration of symbolic richness and power. As the megaliths of Nias Islands, a small part of the men can increase their prestige, and the Kula ring is an ostentatious operation. The Kula ring has also a cumulative aspect. The accumulation of megaliths in the villages at Nias Islands is obvious. Here, the cumulative aspect, it's only known by the stories, the tales of the sailors, telling all of the exchanges that took place during the travel. The prestige is proportional to the number of the temporary exchanges. There is no accumulation of real richness or objects, but accumulation of prestige to very expensive expeditions, with a lot of exchanges of objects without any value. But these exchanges organize reciprocities, social obligations, finally power and social prestige. It seems that this kind of attitude, that is to say an accumulation of power through expensive social obligations, is a general tradition in the Pacific Ocean. But each island or archipelago has its particular system. Carving and transportation of big stones on Nias Island, for example, or exchanges of shell ornaments without value in southeast of Papua New Guinea. The third example is again very large stones on Caroline Islands. Today is the Federated States of Micronesia. On the Yap Island especially, there are big circular stones in front of some houses. These big discs have a hole in their center as the small coins of the beginning of the 20th century in France. Today, we know that these circular stones on the Yap Island have similar aim of the rectangular stones of Nias. A man of an high rank must, to retain its position, must make a demonstration of its large economic possibilities, and the best way for that is to install big stones in front of his house. It's again an expensive and ostentatious process. Look, I am rich. I have a lot of megaliths around my house. Indeed, to obtain a stone, it's necessary to give festivals and food presents for the workmen and their families. A bad interpretation of this system, they say that the circular stones on Yap Island were the biggest coins of the world. But it's just the result of ostentatious operations. By themselves, the stones are no value. A similar situation exists also at Belao. Formerly it was Palaos Islands, on the west part of Micronesia. Here the rich men built a loft for their more beautiful yams and sweet potatoes, and the walls of this loft are open work, and the people can show this richness of food. Never this food will be eaten. It goes rotten only for ostentatious purpose. On Pohnpei Island, here, this part of Federated States of Micronesia, also in the Caroline Archipelago, there are again very large stone constructions. The best example is the site of Nam Madol. In this case, we can speak really about a very big megalithic buildings, nothing less than artificial islands built on coral reef. You see here this small artificial island around a natural island. And this island is a very big megalithic construction. The beginning of the construction of these artificial islands dates back to the 13th century. The technique is very impressive. It's an accumulation of very large basaltic beams. You see here, it's like a beam, but in basalt. Perfectly carved, arranged in courses in perpendicular directions. I have a detail. You see, it's a very large platform on coral reef with very big beams in basalt. We know that these artificial islands were reserved for the elites of the society and for the religious affairs. Again, it was very expensive and ostentatious buildings without any economical interest, but a succession of kings increased their power through so fantastic projects. This kind of construction took place for several generations. Nam Madol was built during a minimum of 3 or 4 centuries. We don't know the exact circumstance of the creation of these megalithic islands, but it's possible that the men of the high class pay for one or more basaltic beams, and that with time the artificial islands came slowly out the water. I have a plan of this site. Yes, it's a plan here. It's around 100 small islands in basalt, and you have here a possibility of reconstruction of this very impressive site. But Namadol is not the only case in Micronesia. We have different sites in the same type. Finally, a large part of Polynesia knows megalithic statues, as the Marquesas Islands, the Society Islands, the Austral Islands, and also the famous Easter Islands. You see a statue from Marquesas, Austral Islands, Tahiti. The Marae, the platform, the statue are erected on a very large platform. Marae in Tahiti, the same monument, the real monument, and a view from the 18th century. And here, the famous platforms, cult platforms of Easter Island with statue on these platforms. All of these monuments are again ostentatious projects. The best example is the statue carved around and inside the volcano Rano Rahaku on Easter Island. You have here the external slope of this volcano with very, very big statues inside a large pit on this slope. More than 100 statues between 5 and 12 meters high are enclosed to 2/3 in big pits. Well, inside the volcano, you have the same statues here erected inside very large pits all around the south part of this volcano, inside the crater. Yeah. The first ethnographic studies in Polynesia were made too late to understand the real context of all of this monumental architecture. But the social structure and the political organization are similar on those of Micronesia. Otherwise, the megaliths of Polynesia have also the same ostentatious connotation. It's therefore possible that the cost of these buildings were also very important in terms of social obligations. In conclusion, in the Pacific area, we can see that all of the collective projects, big buildings, collaring, and so on, implies an important remuneration for the workmen, and the result is always a consolidation of the social structure and an accession for who have paid to a better social position. This aim is obtained by an ostentatious and cumulative art, or by the demonstration of a large accumulation of exchanges, never by the storage of objects with economic value. Yes, you see here a very big statue from this volcano on Easter Island. It was excavated by Thor Heyerdahl in 1955 by Thor Heyerdahl. You see here famous Thor Heyerdahl on this picture. It seems that the megalithic monuments of Europe are in similar position. They have an ostentatious aspect, you know that. They haven't an intrinsic economic value. They were built by an important workforce, maybe expensive, and the benefit are only for some people, maybe. It's also a cumulative architecture with transformations, additions of rooms, and adjunctions of cairn or barrows. Inside, the rest of ancestors are also accumulated through the time. But we haven't any idea of the social structure of the European megalithic people, and we can't translate the 18th century of Oceania to the Neolithic of Europe. Nevertheless, the Oceanic example shows that we can also consider the building of megaliths in Western Europe as an activity with an economic and social impact, not only as a symbolic funeral or religious necessity. Thank you very much for your attention.